He cheated on her. He beat her. He insulted her just because she was an orphan with no one to defend her. But when she finally found the courage to confide in her father-in-law, hoping for a lifeline, her own husband turned into a monster. He didn't just kick her out, he dumped her at a garbage site and said, "This is where you belong." But what Bayo didn't know was that the very trash he threw her into would become the turning point of her life, because someone was watching, and that someone would change her story forever. This isn't just a tale of betrayal, it's a journey of survival, grace, and poetic justice. So sit back, relax, and grab your popcorn, because what you're about to watch will leave you speechless. And if you're just joining us on this channel, make sure to hit the subscribe button and give this video a big thumbs up. You don't want to miss a single second of this unforgettable story. This wedding did not blossom from love. It germinated from ledgers and letters of credit. Long before the bans were published, Chief Jide, Shola's only surviving relative, summoned her to the parlor of his Ikoyi duplex and announced, as though quoting freight rates, that she would marry Bayofemi. "The union will keep my contract with Chief Femi watertight," he said, tapping a calculator. Being an orphan, Shola possessed neither dowry nor defender. She nodded because nodding was safer than questioning, and because no one had ever invited her opinion on her own life. She would marry a stranger, not by choice nor with joy, but out of obedience. On the appointed Saturday, she stood in the cathedral's side alcove, a borrowed veil quivering between the uncertain fingers. There were no bridesmaids, only Chief Jide negotiating in urgent whispers with Chief Femi 2 pews away. The stained glass saints, rosy in the morning light, seemed to recoil at the sound of checks being torn from a book. The groom arrived 15 minutes late, scented faintly of champagne and vanity. He glanced at Shola just long enough to confirm she was physically present, then winked at friends lounging by the rear door. The organist, unsure whether to begin, fumbled a chord before launching the processional. Thus the ceremony lurched forward like a reluctant mule. When the priest intoned, "If any person knows just cause why these two should not be joined," silence thickened until Shola's own voice, small yet unmistakable, slipped out. I do." Gasps ricocheted off marble pillars. Chief Jide's nails dug crescents into her arm. "You will not sink my business," he hissed. Color drained from her cheeks. Obedience, an orphan's oldest reflex, sealed her lips again. 5 aching seconds later, the priest, crimson with confusion, resumed the rite as though nothing had happened. Holy vows in that moment felt more like purchase orders. Confetti spiraled outside, disguising the tremor in Shola's hands. A photographer begged for a smile. She produced a grimace that looked, in retrospect, like a hostage proof of life shot. Bayo accepted congratulations while checking his reflection in the limousine window, already bored of the spectacle. The first night tropical dusk fell abruptly on Victoria Island. Bayo's duplex, a stark white cube overlooking the lagoon, greeted its new mistress with silent corridors and locked cupboards. In the master bedroom, he tossed a scarlet silk nightgown across the mattress. "Wear something respectable tomorrow," he said, unclasping his cufflinks. "I cannot introduce you to people looking like Charity." Shola, raised to say thank you even for scraps, folded the gown with ceremonial care, though it pinched her dignity like barbed wire. Days blurred into humiliating tableaus. A fork slammed because her efforiro was tasteless. A couture dress ripped from her shoulders because it clashed with my reputation. A mobile telephone shattered when she attempted to ring the seamstress who had smiled kindly at her during fittings. Each apology felt smaller than the last, until her own name sounded foreign in her mouth. When loneliness grew unbearable, she began a diary, thin pages devouring blue ink and unspilled tears. She wrote of the cathedral saints who had watched but not intervened, of the veil that fluttered like a frightened bird, of a husband who called her asset in public and baggage in private. She ended one entry with a line she dared not whisper aloud. "I have married a vacancy masquerading as a man." Outside, Lagos glittered with mercies she could not reach. Lagoon breezes, suya smoke, laughter curling from beach bars. Inside, window latches clicked each evening as Bayo performed his ritual of possession, locking her in as casually as most men draw curtains. Every bolt slid home like a full stop, marking the end of whatever sentence Hope was still trying to write. The duplex had 15 sash windows, clean panoramic portals that might have framed sunrise over the lagoon. Yet every dusk found Bayo at each one, twisting the brass latches shut with a meticulous click, click, click that sounded to Shola like padlocks on a cell door. "Security is tight on the island," he would say, pocketing the key. The true prison was not the house. It was the certainty that she would never be allowed to leave it on her own terms. Bayo's routines became laws. On Mondays, he rose before dawn to jog, returning only to complain that the bathroom smelled too feminine. Tuesdays, he arrived early enough to sample dinner and declare it either bland as borehole water or too spicy for civilized tongues. Both verdicts ended with him sweeping the plate into the bin. Wednesdays, he did not return at all, sending a brisk text, "Business drinks. Don't wait up," as though her vigil were optional. Thursdays, he came home wearing unfamiliar perfume and humming club anthems. Fridays were the worst. He burst through the door drunk, cheeks flushed pink beneath brown skin, brandishing new insults he had rehearsed in barroom banter. Shola marked the days in the margin of her diary like tally marks on a prison wall. June 3rd, he snapped because the water glass had fingerprints. June 10th, he laughed that my voice could curdle milk. June 24th, he asked if orphans even know how to love. Each entry ended with the same question, written in delicate cursive: "What is the price of silence?" She never dared write the answer. Everything. One thunder-heavy Tuesday twilight, Bayo's shower whined in the ensuite, and steam coiled under the door. Shola seized the moment, thumb trembling as she dialed her uncle's number. The call connected on the fourth ring. "Uncle, it's me, Shola." A distracted pause, then the rustle of papers. "Why are you calling during business hours?" She swallowed. "Bayo, he hurts me, sir. I think I may die here." Chief Jeed clicked his tongue. "A woman endures, child. Men test their wives. You must stay valuable to him. A merger worth hundreds of millions is hinging on your attitude." "But he locks me in." He raises his hand. "Shola," he interrupted, voice sharpening like a paper edge. "Listen carefully. Marriages are never perfect. Do not embarrass me with melodrama. Stay in your matrimonial home and be grateful your husband provides." The line went dead. For a moment, she stared at the phone as though it might apologize. In the next room, water stopped running. She wiped her tears, hid the phone beneath a sofa cushion, and arranged her face into practiced calm before Bayo emerged wrapped in a towel, smelling of expensive bath oil and an evening's entitlement. Supper was declared inedible, but he ate every bite of jollof rice all the same, as though spite were seasoning. That Friday, storm clouds bruised the afternoon sky. Bayo arrived long after midnight, vodka on his breath and lipstick on his collar. Deep plum, nothing like Shola's timid lip balm. She waited in the sitting room, hands folded, the TV flickering muted adverts. When he staggered in, she tried a softer tactic, voice thin but resolute. "Bayo, please, I beg you, not for fidelity, only caution. Use protection. We might both die of your careless freedom." He froze, incredulous. Then laughter tore from his throat, jagged. "You, a gutter snipe, giving me instruction?" The first slap spun her sideways. The second struck her ear, a metallic hum flooding her skull. Fists rained while the chandelier tinkled overhead as if applauding an unholy performance. When at last he tired, he hurled her against the banister. Blood tasted like iron rain in her mouth. She lay curled until dawn smeared gray light across the Persian carpet. Somewhere upstairs, Bayo snored. With monumental effort, she pushed herself upright, slipped on a faded Ankara wrapper, and tiptoed out before courage dissolved. Her feet were bare, the shoes were in the locked wardrobe, but the driveway stones scarcely registered through the adrenaline. The 6-block trek to Lekki felt endless. Rain began, first a mist, then a tropical torrent ripping leaves from almond trees and plastering her hair flat. Cars hissed by. Twice she almost flagged a taxi, but pride, or perhaps shame, stuffed her hand back to her side. At the wrought iron gates of Chief Jide's townhouse, two security guards exchanged skeptical glances at the drenched, swollen-faced woman. She managed, "Tell my uncle, please, Shola is here." They radioed in. Minutes passed beneath the sacrificial downpour. Finally, Chief Jide emerged beneath a golf umbrella, silk pajamas immaculate. "Jizu," he exclaimed, then lowered his voice. "Neighbors will talk. Go home this instant." "Uncle, just one night inside," she pleaded, voice rasping. "I fear he'll kill me." "That is a wife's cross," he snapped. "Besides, you chose him." The umbrella twitched, repositioned to keep him dry while rain sluiced across her shoulders. The gates closed, locks slid, thunder cracked like celestial gavel. Shola staggered back to the road, heart disintegrating with each footstep. By the time she reached Victoria Island, dawn glimmered through retreating clouds. She found the front door locked from within. Too weak to scale the low wall, she sank onto the welcome mat. Live, laugh, love. Irony blurring behind tears. At sunrise, the door opened with an impatient jerk. Bayo stepped out, pressing phone to ear, already mid-argument about sales targets. He glanced down at the crumpled figure like one might regard a stray newspaper. "You look wretched. Clean yourself before the neighbors wake." He stepped over her, designer loafers avoiding the mud. The door slammed shut behind him. Shola remained on the mat, jelly-limbed, watching the pink sky fade to ordinary blue and wondering for the first time whether death would feel kinder than survival. A stray kitten wandered up, mewing. She stroked its damp fur and whispered, "We are both unwanted, aren't we?" The kitten purred, a small, stubborn proof that gentleness could still exist on the other side of cruelty. Inside, the 15 windows caught the climbing sun, panes gleaming like prison mirrors. For Shola, morning brought not freedom, but the realization that escape would require more than courage. It would require a door she had yet to imagine into existence. Shola had never imagined her marriage would teach her the biology of fear. But in Bayo's house, even the ordinary came laced with threat. She learned to flinch at the clink of ice in a glass. She memorized the pitch of his footsteps, light when sober, thunderous when drunk. She knew when to hold her breath and when to pretend to be asleep. But the fear that now clawed at her ribs was no longer about bruises or broken plates, it was about infection. The discovery came by accident. One quiet morning she was gathering his dirty laundry. From the pocket of his navy trousers, a crumpled paper fell. A pharmacy receipt. Shola picked it up, eyes scanning the line items. Azithromycin, cefixime, metronidazole. Her fingers trembled. These weren't vitamins. They were antibiotics. Prescribed, she knew from childhood health talks in the orphanage, for the treatment of sexually transmitted infections. Her heart sank. She sat on the edge of the bed for an hour, the receipt clenched in her palm, unsure whether to cry, confront, or pray. She chose the last. Kneeling beside the bed, she whispered, "God, I don't know what I'm doing, but I don't want to die. Not like this." That evening, she cooked Bayo's favorites, grilled turkey wings, yam porridge, and peppered snails. The scent filled the kitchen. She even changed into a yellow wrapper with floral patterns, one of the few items he hadn't thrown out. Bayo walked in around 10:40 p.m., slightly tipsy. His shirt was unbuttoned at the top, and he reeked of whiskey and another woman's perfume. Still, Shola greeted him with a soft, "Welcome," and helped him remove his jacket. He grunted, tossed his car keys on the table, and slumped into a dining chair. When he tasted the food, he nodded. "Not bad. You didn't mess it up today." Shola smiled faintly. After he had eaten, she brought him a glass of water and sat across from him. Her hands rested on her lap, twisted tightly together. Her voice, when it came, was a whisper. "Bayo, can we talk?" He looked up, irritation already simmering. "About what?" "I know you see other women," she said carefully. "I'm not here to fight you or tell you what to do. I just want us to be safe." His brow furrowed. "Safe how?" "I found the receipt from the pharmacy. You're treating something. And I understand, but please use protection, just so we don't endanger each other's lives." There was a heavy silence. Then his laugh came, sharp, mocking, slicing through the moment like a razor. You, a gutter girl from Mushin, giving me advice on protection? He stood, shoving the chair back. Who the hell do you think you are? I'm your wife, she said gently, tears already building. And I don't want to die, Bayo. That's all I'm asking. For us to be careful. His eyes darkened. You ungrateful wretch. And then the explosion came. The first slap struck her left cheek with such force she crashed to the tiled floor. The taste of blood filled her mouth, but he wasn't done. He kicked her in the ribs, then dragged her up by the wrist. You think you're too wise now, Abi? Talking to me like you're my equal? She cried out, begged him to stop, shielding her face with trembling arms. But Bayo was blind in that moment, possessed by rage and ego and the need to assert power. When he finally stopped, her head throbbed and her vision blurred. He threw her across the living room like garbage and stormed upstairs, cursing the day he married her. Shola lay there for hours. She couldn't move, couldn't cry. The pain was more than physical, it was spiritual. She felt discarded, tainted, worthless. She thought of her parents, faces she barely remembered, and wondered what they would say if they could see their daughter now. Would they be proud? Would they ask her why she stayed? Eventually, she dragged herself up and crawled to the bathroom. She cleaned her wounds with cold water, biting down on a towel to keep from screaming. As she stared at herself in the mirror, one eye swelling shut and lips bloodied, she whispered, "Is this what marriage means?" She couldn't sleep that night. She sat curled in the corner of the room, arms around her knees, eyes wide open until morning came. Her diary lay on the floor beside her, open to a blank page. Slowly, with shaking hands, she wrote, "He told me I was lucky to have him, but luck should not feel like dying in slow motion. I asked for a condom. I received a lesson in hierarchy. This house has no windows, only mirrors. And in every one I see a stranger staring back." The pain from Bayo's beating still lingered when Shola awoke the next morning. Her face felt like clay pressed too hard at one side. Her ribs ached with every breath. She moved slowly through the house, like a shadow of herself. The silence was heavy, no apology, no remorse, not even a glance of guilt from Bayo. He had left early, as usual, slamming the door behind him and leaving her to pick up the shards of her dignity. By mid-afternoon, Shola sat quietly on the couch, a warm towel pressed to her cheek. That was when the doorbell rang. She peered through the curtain and gasped. It was Chief Femi, Bayo's father. She hesitated. What did he want? In all her months of marriage, he had never visited without calling first. With trembling hands, she opened the door. "Daddy, good afternoon," she greeted, curtsying slightly. He looked at her intently, his eyes immediately narrowing. "What happened to your face?" he asked sharply. She looked down. "Nothing, sir." "Don't lie to me," he said sternly. "Who did this?" Tears welled in her eyes. "Talk to me, Shola." And finally she did. The words spilled like a river breaking its dam. She told him about the insults, the beatings, the infidelity, the threats, the fear. She told him everything, except one thing, her silence, because that silence had cost her more than words could explain. Chief Femi stood in the middle of the living room, stunned. When she finished, he was silent for several long seconds. He eventually exhaled heavily and nodded. "Thank you for telling me. You've done nothing wrong." Then he turned and left. That evening, Bayo came home much earlier than usual, but there was no kiss, no greeting, only storm clouds in his eyes. "You went and reported me to my father?" he barked. Shola froze. "You want to ruin me, Abi? You want him to cut me off from the company?" "I didn't tell him to punish you," she said gently. "He asked, I only answered." Bayo's chest heaved. He didn't hit her, not this time, but his silence was louder than a slap. For the next few days, he barely spoke to her. He would leave the house in the morning without a word and return late at night. She heard him banging things in the guest room. Something was coming. She could feel it. And then one evening he struck. It was a Saturday. The rain poured heavily, drumming the rooftop like a warning bell. Shola was in the kitchen, stirring soup, when she heard Bayo's voice. "Shola, come here." She wiped her hands and walked to the sitting room. There in the center of the room was her old Ghana Musco bag, the one she had brought when she first moved in after the wedding. It was sitting beside a pile of the oldest, most tattered clothes she owned. "What's this?" she asked. "You're leaving," Bayo said flatly. "You don't belong here anymore." "What?" "You heard me. Get out." She shook her head in disbelief. "Bayo, please, where will I go?" "That's not my problem," he snapped. "You think you can go crying to my father and remain here? Nonsense." He grabbed the bag and stuffed the ragged clothes inside. Old wrappers, worn-out slippers, threadbare nightgowns. None of the clothes he bought her were included. "I said, take only what you came with." He opened the door. "Move." "Bayo, please," she cried. But he grabbed her arm, dragged her out into the rain, and pushed her toward the car. She sat silently in the back seat, drenched and shivering, tears mingling with the storm on her cheeks. They drove for 30 minutes out of Victoria Island, through the back roads of Lagos. Shola had no idea where they were headed. Finally, Bayo stopped near a garbage dump, Oluwa refuse site, where trash bags rotted under makeshift wooden signs. It stank of filth and forgotten lives. He stepped out, opened the door, and yanked her out. "This is where you belong," he said. "Trash among trash." She stumbled, falling onto the mud beside broken bottles and leftover amala in a torn takeaway pack. Her bag landed beside her with a thud. "Tell my father thank you for the disgrace." Then he turned, got into the car, and sped off, tires screeching as if in celebration of the cruelty just committed. Shola sat there, soaked to the bone, stunned. For the first time, she truly understood what it meant to be discarded. Not left behind, discarded. She looked around. Flies buzzed. A rat darted between two bins. A child scavenged in the corner, looking at her with curiosity. She tried to stand, but pain shot through her leg. She cried again, quietly this time, because even her voice had abandoned her. She curled up against a wall of old tires, pulling her bag close like a shield. She whispered, "God, if you're watching, I don't have strength anymore." And then a car approached. Headlights glowed through the rain. It slowed down, stopped. From inside, a tall man in a spotless white caftan stepped out holding an umbrella. His eyes met hers. He didn't look away. He walked gently toward her, avoiding puddles, and crouched beside her. "Young lady," he said in a deep, calm voice, "who did this to you?" Shola opened her mouth, but no words came. The man looked at her with kindness. He gently reached out and helped her to her feet. "I don't know what you've done," he said softly, "but no one deserves to be thrown away like this. No one." He signaled to his driver and turned to her. "My name is Emeka. Emeka, Japan. You'll be all right." That was the night her life changed. Not with fireworks, not with revenge, but with kindness from a stranger under a Lagos rain. Shola could barely stand as Emeka, Japan steadied her with his arm. Her legs buckled under her, soaked and bruised, but his grip was firm and steady. His white caftan, still pristine despite the pouring rain and the muddy dump site, flowed like a banner of hope. The moment didn't feel real. Perhaps it wasn't. Perhaps she had finally passed out, and this was heaven. But no, she could still smell the rotting garbage. She could still feel the sting of her swollen cheek. This was Earth. This was real. "Please," Emeka said, glancing briefly at her shivering hands. "Let me help you." Shola tried to speak, but only a croak came out. She was too weak, too broken. Emeka didn't wait for permission. He turned to his driver. "Open the back door." Then to Shola he said, "You're going home. With me." In minutes, she found herself inside a black Lexus SUV, the warmth of the interior wrapping around her like a blanket. She sat in silence, clutching her torn bag on her lap. Her clothes were drenched, her hair matted, and her dignity in pieces. But for the first time in what felt like eternity, no one shouted at her. No one raised a hand. No one demanded obedience. Only silence, and the soft purr of the engine. Emeka glanced at her from the front seat. "You don't need to explain now. Let's get you dry and fed." She turned her face toward the window, and a tear slipped down her cheek. Not from pain this time, but from the unfamiliar feeling of being safe. They arrived at a mansion in Ikoyi, tall white walls, sculpted hedges, security lights like halos. The gates opened slowly, revealing a modern architectural masterpiece with sprawling marble steps, elegant columns, and a perfectly manicured lawn. Shola blinked. This couldn't be real. She expected the guards to stop them, to say, "She's dirty, sir," or "Don't bring her in here." But they bowed respectfully as the car passed. The maid, Mama Oge, a motherly woman in her 50s with a wide smile and compassionate eyes, met them at the door. She gasped when she saw Shola and immediately stepped forward. "Jesu, Olga, what happened to her?" "She was thrown out like garbage," Emeka said, his voice low and controlled. "Help her clean up. Give her food. Make sure she sleeps well tonight." "Yes, sir," Mama Oge said, already guiding Shola in. Emeka looked at Shola one more time before she disappeared up the stairs. "You're safe now," he said. "No one will hurt you here." That night, Shola had the first proper bath in weeks. Mama Oga ran warm water into a freestanding tub and helped her wash gently, humming hymns in Yoruba. She dressed her in a soft cotton nightgown and led her to a guest suite that was bigger than her entire duplex with Bayo. The bed was high, soft, and warm. The air smelled of lavender and fresh linen. She couldn't believe this was still the same day, the same life. On the nightstand, a small bowl of jollof rice, fried plantain, and grilled chicken awaited her. Shola stared at the food. Her stomach growled, but she hesitated. "Eat," Mama Oga urged. "Oga said you must eat something." Shola nodded slowly and took the first bite, and then she wept. She hadn't cried when Bayo slapped her. She hadn't cried when her uncle slammed his gate. She hadn't even cried when she was dumped like rubbish. But now, in a room filled with peace, with warm food in her mouth and kind eyes watching her, she broke down. Every sob felt like poison leaving her body. Mama Oge sat with her silently, holding her hand. The next morning, Emeka returned to check on her. He found her sitting by the window, staring out at the garden. "You slept well?" he asked gently. "Yes, thank you," she replied softly, her voice almost a whisper. "Are you ready to talk?" She looked at him and nodded, and then with tears in her eyes, she told him everything. About being forced into marriage like a pawn in a business game. About the verbal abuse, the isolation, the fear. About being thrown out into the street like garbage. About begging her uncle and being told to endure. About living each day as a ghost, silent and invisible, until finally even that ghost was discarded. Emeka listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't try to finish her sentences. He didn't tell her she should have left earlier or that she was foolish to stay. He simply listened, with compassion in his eyes and respect in his silence. When she finished, she looked down, ashamed. "I know I must sound weak to you, but I didn't have anywhere else to go." Emeka shook his head. "No, you sound like a woman who survived hell. That's not weakness, Shola. That's strength." He stood, pacing slowly. "You know, I've built my business on timing, knowing when to hold, when to act, when to walk away. But what I saw yesterday, it shook me. A woman treated like waste in a country that should know better." Shola wiped her eyes. "Thank you for saving me." "I didn't save you," Emeka said. "I just saw a treasure in the wrong place." He paused. "I want to help you, not out of pity, but because I see someone who deserves better. And because I believe your story isn't over." Later that day, Emeka called his personal lawyer. "I want you to look into the man who did this to her," he said. "His name is Bayo Femi. Let's find out who owns the house he's living in. I don't want to hurt him unless the law demands it. But I will not let this end with silence." But when he told Shola about his plan to take legal action, she shook her head. "No," she whispered. "Please, I don't want revenge. I just want peace." Emeka was stunned. "After everything he did?" She nodded. "I want him to live his life. I want to live mine, that's all." Emeka looked at her with awe. Forgiveness, real forgiveness, was rare in a world that loved retaliation. But this woman, abandoned, bruised, and nearly broken, still carried a heart that refused to harden. "I have never met anyone like you," Emeka said. And in that moment, without warning, he made a silent vow. Whatever it took, whatever the case, he would give her the life she was denied. Not as compensation, not as charity, but as justice wrapped in grace. Emeka Japan had known many women in his life, models, CEOs, diplomats' daughters, but none had ever washed his car. So when he stepped out onto his balcony one dewy morning and saw Shola on her knees scrubbing the rims of his black Lexus, he stood frozen, baffled. She wore one of Mama Oge's oversized wrappers, her natural hair tied in a scarf. A bucket of soapy water stood nearby, and her hands worked with quiet purpose. She hadn't noticed him yet. She was humming, humming. After everything she had endured, this woman was humming. He descended the stairs and approached her slowly. "Shola, what are you doing?" She startled, nearly tipping the bucket. "Oh, good morning, sir." "You shouldn't be out here washing cars. You're not a maid." She stood up, wiping her wet hands on the wrapper. "I'm not doing it because I have to. I'm doing it because I'm grateful." "You've been through enough. You deserve rest." Shola smiled faintly. "Rest doesn't fill my heart the way work does. At least this way, I feel like I'm giving back." Emeka looked at her, really looked. There were still signs of pain in her eyes, but there was also strength, a quiet resilience that no beating could erase. "All right," he said, "but next time let the staff handle it. You've done enough for today." She nodded. "Yes, sir." Later that day, Emeka canceled a business lunch. He sat at the dining table in his home, watching as Shola brought out a steaming plate of food. Vegetable soup, pounded yam, and grilled tilapia seasoned with crayfish and bitter leaf. She set it gently in front of him. "I wasn't sure if you like spicy food," she said, a little nervous. He took a bite, then another. And then he set his fork down and leaned back stunned. "This is incredible." Her cheeks flushed. "Thank you. Mama Oge taught you this?" "No," she said almost shyly. "I used to cook a lot for him." Emeka didn't need to ask who him was. "And he still treated you like that?" he asked softly. Shola shrugged. "When someone doesn't value you, it doesn't matter what you do." There was a silence between them. Heavy, but not uncomfortable. "I value this," he said, lifting his fork again. "And I value you." She looked up, startled. He meant every word. That evening, they sat in the garden. The sun was dipping into the horizon, casting gold across the grass. Shola sipped Zobo from a glass while Emeka shared stories of his youth, how he started by hawking brake pads in Onitsha before building his first container shipment business. He told her about losing his mother at 16 and how it hardened him. "I never let anyone close after that," he admitted. "Business was my safety net." "And now?" she asked. He looked at her, eyes steady. "Now, I'm beginning to see that healing doesn't come from walls. It comes from people." She lowered her eyes. "I'm still broken." "No, you're mending," he said. "In the way you choose gentleness, after everything, that's strength." There was another long pause, filled only by birdsong and the hush of evening. Then Shola whispered, "I never thought I'd feel peace again." Emeka leaned forward. "I want you to have more than in peace. I want you to have joy too." 1 week turned into 2, then 3. Every morning, Shola would water the flowers or polish the furniture. She made fresh juice with breakfast, laughed with Mama Oge, and occasionally read books from the study. Every evening, Emeka would find an excuse to sit with her, on the balcony, by the koi pond, in the courtyard under the stars. They talked about everything and nothing. Politics, pain, music, soup recipes, forgiveness. And slowly, Emeka's heart began to shift. This wasn't pity. This wasn't obligation. This was love, unforced, unexpected, undiluted. On the 24th day, he couldn't hold it in anymore. They were having breakfast under the gazebo. Shola had made akara and pap. He looked at her, eyes serious. "Shola, I have something to say, and I don't want you to feel pressured. I just need to speak the truth." She looked up, her heart already racing. "I never planned to feel this way. But you changed something in me. You remind me of who I was before money and power became everything. You bring peace into rooms where I only used to chase performance. You've shown me strength isn't loud, it's consistent." She blinked, unsure of what to say. "I know you're still healing, and I'm not asking you to forget your past. I'm only asking..." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Would you let me build a new future with you?" He opened it, a gold band, elegant and simple. Shola's hands flew to her mouth. You want to marry me? Yes, not because I rescued you, but because I see who you are, because I respect you, and because I love you. Tears filled her eyes. Emeka, I've been treated like trash for so long. I don't even know how to feel like someone worthy. He stood, took her hand, and knelt before her. Let me remind you, every day. She was crying now, silently, freely. Yes, she whispered. He smiled. Yes, yes, I will marry you. And so less than a month after being thrown out like garbage, Shola became the bride of one of the most powerful men in Nigeria. There was no media coverage, no socialites, no flashy extravagance, just a chapel by the sea, a string quartet, Mama Oga in tears, and a barefoot flower girl from the orphanage, tossing rose petals as Shola walked down the aisle. And Emeka stood waiting at the altar, heart bursting with pride, not because of what she had survived, but because of what she had become. His wife, his miracle, his treasure risen from the dust. Emeka Japan believed in quiet justice, the kind that didn't need headlines or revenge speeches. But the day he saw Shola hesitating in front of the mirror, brushing her fingers gently over the scar near her eye, he knew something had to be done. Not for vengeance, but for restoration. Shola had become a pillar in his home, gentle, grateful, and diligent. Yet he could see the weight she carried. Whenever she passed the guest room mirror, she would pause. Her fingers would twitch. Her eyes would dim. No words were spoken, but the message was loud. A part of me still lives in that house. That night, Emeka summoned his personal lawyer. I want to buy a property, he said, discreetly, a duplex in Victoria Island. Find out who owns Bayofemi's building. Within 48 hours, the paperwork was on his desk. It's owned by a Lebanese investor, the lawyer explained. An old man. The property is up for private sale. He's willing to offload it for the right price. Emeka didn't blink. Offer him full asking. Transfer it into Shola's name. The sale went through in days. 2 weeks later, Bayo received a knock on the door. It was the house manager. We've been directed to issue a formal notice, the manager said, holding an envelope. The property has been sold. You have 30 days to vacate. The new landlord wants to take possession. What nonsense is this? Bako barked, yanking the paper from his hand. Sold to who? The new owner requested discretion, sir, the man replied coolly. However, she will be available to speak with you regarding the timeline for relocation. She? Bayo's heart skipped. A meeting was arranged. The address was the property office in Ikoyi. Bayo arrived late, disheveled, smelling faintly of stale beer and frustration. The past few months hadn't been kind. He had been demoted at his father's company, his relationships had crumbled, and his finances were strained. He was ushered into a conference room, and there she was, Shola, seated calmly at the table, dressed in a white blouse and emerald skirt, a soft confidence in her eyes. She looked nothing like the woman he had tossed into the mud. She looked like royalty. Bayo stood frozen. You're the new landlord? He whispered. Shola simply nodded. Yes. He blinked hard, trying to process it. But how? She didn't answer that. Instead, she slid the eviction notice back toward him. You have 30 days, but I'm giving you 2 weeks. Bayo's jaw clenched. You're doing this to disgrace me, right? To get back at me? Shola looked at him for a long moment. Then she said softly, if I wanted revenge, I wouldn't be sitting here. I'm only doing what you taught me, to stop staying where I'm not respected. He looked down. For once, no words came. As he turned to leave, she added, Bayo, I forgive you, but your cruelty no longer has a place in my life. Outside, Bayo staggered into the sunlight like a man emerging from a dream. Everything he thought he controlled, his house, his power, even her silence, was gone. And this time, no one was coming to save him. Back in the room, Shola sighed and whispered a quiet prayer, not of victory, but of release. Justice had finally spoken. Not through fists, not through fire, but through a deed, signed in her name. Bayo stood on the side of the road, drenched in sweat and in shame, watching the last taxi disappear into the Lagos night. The eviction had felt like a bad dream, but now it was reality. His belongings sat in a battered suitcase at his feet. His bank account was nearly empty. His friends no longer answered his calls. His job at his father's company had been quietly dissolved weeks ago. All he had left was his ego, and even that was crumbling. When he arrived at his father's Banana Island mansion, he pressed the buzzer, shoulders slumped. The security guard gave him a hesitant look and stepped aside to make a call. A few minutes later, Chief Femi himself stepped out, arms folded across his agbada, disappointment carved deep into his face. "Daddy," Bayo began, but his father cut him off with a single gesture. "Go home." "I don't have a home." "You had one, and you destroyed it." Bayo dropped his voice. "Please, just let me stay here for a while. I'll sort myself out." Chief Femi shook his head slowly. "I warned you, I gave you everything, and you used it to humiliate a woman who only ever wanted your respect. But she forgave you, and you still threw her out like trash." The elder man's voice cracked. "Your wickedness ruined you. You're no longer welcome under my roof." And just like that, the gates shut. No shouting, no fight, just silence. That night, Bayo slept in a run-down guest house on the mainland. No electricity, no fan, just a creaking mattress and the sound of rats in the ceiling. He lay awake staring at the cracked ceiling, hearing Shola's voice over and over. "I don't want revenge. I just want peace." The very peace he never gave her was now haunting him. Across the city, peace had finally made its home. Shola stood on a polished stage in the garden of the Ikoyi mansion she now called home. Fairy lights twinkled above. Guests filled the courtyard. Women survivors, donors, friends. Beside her stood Emeka, his hand resting gently at her back. She looked out at the crowd and smiled. Behind her hung a banner. Grand opening of the Amara Haven, a shelter for women in crisis. She stepped forward, microphone in hand, her voice steady and warm. "There was a time when I believed suffering in silence was noble. That endurance made me a good woman. That being beaten, humiliated, and abandoned was my cross to carry. But I've learned something. No one deserves to be treated like garbage. No one should be thrown out like yesterday's news because they have no family or power. Women are not property. We are not disposable." A pause. "And that is why this home exists, so that no woman will ever have to sleep on a welcome mat in the rain, wondering if she matters." The crowd erupted in applause. Emeka kissed her forehead. Shola turned and cut the ribbon. Laughter, ululations, and tears filled the air. Cameras flashed. But more than that, healing was present. Later that evening, as they sat in the quiet garden, Emeka looked at her. "You changed everything." "No," she said, resting her head on his shoulder. "I just refused to stay broken." In that moment, Emeka knew he hadn't married a victim. He had married a woman who rose from the ashes of cruelty and used those ashes to light a fire that would warm the world. And Bayo? He watched the story unfold on a borrowed phone, sitting on a pavement near a BRT terminal. His name wasn't mentioned, but his shame was loud enough. 6 months later, the High Court of Lagos granted Shola an uncontested divorce. Bayo didn't show up. He didn't send a lawyer. He didn't respond to the petition. It was as though he had vanished from the very world he once controlled. The court dissolved the marriage in less than 15 minutes. When the judge looked at Shola and said, "You are now free," she smiled. Not the kind of smile that comes from triumph, but the kind that comes from quiet release. The kind of smile that says, "I made it out alive." Shola walked out of the courtroom into a bright Lagos morning, the sky painted with strokes of soft gold. Emeka was waiting for her outside, dressed in a gray caftan, his eyes full of pride. "It's done," she whispered. "Yes," he replied, taking her hand. "Now we begin again." And begin again they did. Shola donated the rental profits from the duplex, her former prison, to a newly established vocational training center for women escaping domestic violence. The facility offered tailoring, hairdressing, baking, and even tech courses. It was her way of turning pain into purpose. One of the first beneficiaries was Wura, a former taxi driver who had lost everything after fleeing an abusive marriage. Now she was the official driver for the Amara Haven. Her first assignment? Picking up girls who had been kicked out of homes with nowhere to go, just like Shola once was. The initiative made headlines across Nigeria, from beaten to builder, how one woman's pain sparked a movement. Shola refused interviews. Her work spoke loud enough. Somewhere in Surulere, Bayo sat beneath a rusting zinc shelter outside a roadside bar, nursing a plastic cup of palm wine. He hadn't shaved in weeks. His once polished shoes were scuffed beyond recognition. His phone, bought on credit, had been disconnected. When he saw a newspaper headline featuring Emeka and Shola launching a second women's shelter in Abuja, he looked away. Regret, when it finally came, didn't shout. It whispered, "You could have had a queen. You treated her like dust." One Saturday morning, Shola returned to her old street, not as the discarded wife, but as a guest of honor at a community empowerment seminar. She stood before young girls, some with bruises they tried to hide, others with eyes still full of questions. "I was once told that obedience meant silence," she said softly. "But today I stand here not because I obeyed cruelty, but because I walked away from it." The girls clapped, some cried, and Shola smiled again. This time not because she was free, but because she had finally found purpose in her pain. Moral lesson: never let anyone define your worth through cruelty. What the world discards, grace can restore. True strength is not in enduring abuse, but in rising above it and using your pain to protect and empower others. We hope you were touched by this story. Please share your thoughts and lessons in the comments. We truly love reading them. And guess what? Another powerful and life-changing story is coming your way in just a few days. So make sure to subscribe and turn on your notification bell so you'll be the first to watch when it drops. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video and share it with your friends and family.